sensing into your new reality, which is going to be one where you show up prepared and with a clear map for what this progression is going to look like and how you're going to eventually deal with the downswing when it happens. The downswing won't hurt now, not nearly as much, because it won't trigger your flight system, because you've created a cushion with the necessary awareness around it that doesn't see this as something that makes you punished or less worthy. It's just something that was bound to happen because you chose poker for a living. You completely disidentify from the downswing, basically. So sensing into this new reality, is there anything that you feel you still have resistance around in terms of the process? Let's pretend you already had it mapped out. I know you're going to have to go home and figure out, like, how many buy-ins can I shoot at 510 and how many buy-ins do I need before I really move up to 510? But thinking in terms of, like, even the next year to 2 years, where do you sense frustration with this process? Is there any resistance to the idea that you thought this was going to move faster?
It's really interesting is, like, for example, I kind of prepared myself for a 10 buy-in downswing mentally. So I knew that, like, for example, a live poker player can go on a 10 buy-in downswing, which is what my thought process was. Because I know my brother went on a 10 buy-in downswing. It was really hard for him. So when he told me about that, like, in my mind, I kind of prepared for a 10 buy-in downswing. So when I actually went on, like, a 12 buy-in downswing, that still hurt. So I'm just wondering, like, although we're preparing a cushion for it to happen, I think, like, when it actually happens, it still affects you a lot mentally. So
it will.
I'm just wondering, like, like, now that I think about a 25 buy-in downswing, which is like another step even further.
Let's go with that, because that is an extreme downswing.
That is an extreme downswing.
Okay.
Like, when I went on 12 buy-in, that was already it was huge for me mentally. So to think about it, like, twice the scale for that.
And potentially twice the time.
Twice the time to get out of that. I'm just trying to think how I would handle it. Like, I mean...
Good question. So what is the perspective that we could take when that's happening that would give us the best chance to navigate that potential reality in the healthiest way?
Like, what do you think? What was the question? So it was...
No, I'm thinking.
You're thinking.
I'm thinking about the answer to the perspective I wanted to part onto you.
Right.
When that happens, which it will.
Okay, yeah.
It'll happen because variance has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And you're a professional, which means you're going to play an amount of volume over your career where this thing is inescapable.
Yeah.
And you're choosing that consciously. Maybe that's step one. You are choosing to attract this thing, but not because you're inferior or unlucky, because it's inevitable.
Yeah.
And you're choosing to enter this model because the upside eventually is very good, but this is embedded.
Yeah. It's part of the process.
Inescapable.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, okay, so I went through some pretty bad downswings this year. I'll try to sense into...
This year?
This year, yeah.
Okay.
The perspectives that brought me out of it.
Sure.
I think a lot of the mindset upgrades that occurred for me this year were contributed by those downswings.
Okay.
And this isn't the same as me necessarily needing to hit a rock bottom to understand something, because I really was well rolled for these downswings. They just happened.
Yeah.
And still I learned a lot from them. One of the things I can say is it made me understand what card distribution can actually do. And when I saw how much I was projecting onto my opponents, like, okay, I have to explain this clearly.
Yeah. Please.
When you're on a downswing, everybody seems to be running extremely well.
Yeah.
It's not just like you're running bad at all in. It's like they're getting an extraordinary amount of value and they seem to always be betting and have it.
Yeah.
So one thing that happens is your mind starts to be like, he just can't have it this time. They can't keep having it. And you begin to deviate from your methodology. You maybe start bluff catching more or rationalizing. So one thing it did for me was it cleansed my perspective in the sense that I no longer think that they can't have it. Like, he very much can just be running well. And I need to respect the fact that there is a balance between observing his tendencies and concluding that he's bluffing more just because his frequencies are a bit higher. And this goes down to sample size. How long has he been betting this way? Is it really this guy who's always betting, or is it just the idea in my head that everybody seems to be running over me because I'm just on a downswing?
Yeah.
Like, there's a difference there, and it's a calibrated skill set to be able to determine when it's time to adjust to a player. And it's hardest when you're on a downswing.
So hard, yeah.
Because the frequencies are completely distorted to begin with. They are on a heater. They are getting a disproportionate amount of value. So I think one of the strongest questions or perspectives you can hold, and this came from a podcast that my younger brother showed me at one point. It was a guy who was saying that he's at a point in his entrepreneurial life where when people tell him this doesn't make any sense, what he hears in his head is, reality is operating in a way that I don't believe it should be operating. Something like this.
Okay.
They just have a distorted picture of how the reality should actually be functioning. And that's creating a difference or a distance or a dissonance, a cognitive dissonance, when it actually does go that way, because it's allowed to go that way.
It can, yeah.
Can.
Yeah.
And in your case, it will, for all intents and purposes. And in my case, too. So that was one big thing, is like cleansing the perception that this is allowed to happen and they're allowed to run well. And I don't need to try to combat that by taking control back or invalidating their run good by attempting to stop it, which really only perpetuates my run bad. Because now I'm punting money into somebody who's on a heater.
Yeah.
As if that's going to do anything.
It's just, yeah, you know exactly what you're trying to say. You're trying to stop what's going to happen anyway.
You're trying to stop what you can't stop.
Correct, yeah. And you're trying to like...
and by doing so, you make it worse.
Make it worse, yeah. You change the way you play, you know, it just makes it worse. So.
Now, the second thing that I think is important is truly coming to a new empowered perspective that I am deriving satisfaction and fulfillment from handling this in a mature way. Do you have a roommate?
Yes.
Your goal should be for your roommate to not know whether or not you're on a downswing. Your goal as a human who plays poker should be for your roommate to never be able to tell if you're on a downswing.
Okay.
Not for him and not for your self-image, but because it's a good proxy for how well you're able to deal with it internally and approach yourself in real life with other people who you're interacting with.
Yeah, yeah.
I could give a fuck if your roommate thinks that you're like a responsible human. I mean, it'd be better for you guys to be friends, but for the most part, living with someone is a very good test. It keeps you in check.
Yeah.
Am I approaching the relationship in the same way as I would if I was winning? Because you'll notice your conversations might be a little bit more light when you're on an upswing.
Yeah.
You might have more healthy advice for him.
You're in a better mood.
Or if you have a girlfriend, like anything, like pick somebody who's in close contact with you on a regular basis and really ask yourself if that relationship is shifting based on your results.
Yeah.
If that's happening, it's your first indicator that you're riding it too close.
I feel like that subconsciously happens without you even realizing it.
Oh, of course it does. That's why you just have to scrape at this and keep bringing awareness to it.
Yeah.
During my worst downswings, I take a lot of pride in bringing positive emotions to people around me. Like, this is a selfish thing that I do, but I think it's also paradoxically humble. When I'm on a downswing, the thing that's on my mind the most is I want to be a beacon of inspiration for the person who's observing me.
Okay.
And I want to be an inspiration for the person who's observing my downswing, because they're going to go through it at one point.
Yeah, yeah.
And I want them to see how it can be dealt with maturely, because I know ultimately, and this is the selfish part, I want to be around that person who handles it maturely.
Yeah.
I want to be around a group of people who's able to handle variance maturely.
Yeah.
Because the alternative is what? We all just cycle through our fucking super petty emotions and project onto each other when things aren't going well in poker. No thanks. So there are things you can do that you can adopt into your core value system that will serve as fuel in your tank when this happens. Yeah. And I think a lot of this comes down to core values, like inserting yourself into the worst downswing ever and being like, straight up visualizing, who do I want to be when that's happening? That will take you a long way.
That's really inspiring to think that, to even think about it from this perspective where when you're going on your biggest downswing, you want to be the person that's like, so you want to be the idol for the person. Well, I just lost my train of thought.
And it doesn't require that you be this like steel character either.
Yeah.
Like, this is the paradox of it. It's been coming up a lot in these talks. The vulnerability that you show is the actual inspiring demonstration. So it doesn't look like I'm on a downswing and nobody can tell because I'm just this icy steel motherfucker.
Yeah.
It's, I can have a discussion with you that I'm on a downswing, and you can see that I'm approaching it from a mature place, and I'm going to get through this because I understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Those are two different things. And the importance of separating those two models is that, especially if you're going to inspire other players, like as a coach, there's a tendency for me to slip into believing that I need to be the steel, no emotion downswing guy. But nobody actually benefits from that. And when I saw that clearly, I said, okay, so not only is this selfish from a coaching standpoint, but I'm harboring resistance that I could be purifying myself of if I was just more vulnerable through this process. So now what the process looks like is, I won't flame the chat and be like, guys, this is going so badly, I'm on a downswing, woe is me. It'll just be an update report in our accountability thread that says, I've played this many hours this month, I'm actually running quite badly, but I'm learning this, and this, and it's actually allowed me to create some really cool new content that I can't wait to share. It's an upgrade for me that I can deliver to them because it's given me new perspectives, deep perspectives that I wouldn't be able to contact if I didn't uproot the distortion that was riding at the bottom of my system. Like, that's what the downswing really does for you. It gives you a chance to glimpse the darkest part of your psyche that usually doesn't get triggered because there's not enough catalyst triggering it.
Yep.
So to balance that paradox of, it's so important that people understand the difference between handling a downswing maturely and closing yourself off emotionally. Those are not they're not the same thing, and they don't get the same response. They don't provide the healthy response. The type of upgrade that I'm talking about is being so sure that the downswing has nothing to do with you on an identity level, that you're able to approach it in a way that's disidentified from it, almost as if you're a third party removed from it, but still paradoxically intimately interfacing with it and letting it teach you as much as it can in the process. And that goes back to not positioning yourself as the unlucky victim of the downswing. The biggest thing that happens as you go through cycles, you asked me this at the beginning, like, what's the biggest thing that changes? Or what's the biggest thing that has the most impact on being able to handle a downswing better? It's going through cycles and cycles of them to develop two very core beliefs. Number one, this has nothing to do with me as a person. I'm not being punished. And number two, everything that I've learned, the most important lessons I have learned, have come from going through the downswing.
Yeah.
And then pump volume. With that all in place, and you'll notice it when you lock into this, when you actually arrive at a more balanced place in your expectation of your career and your perception of downswings, which go hand in hand, what you will see is you will be addicted to playing in a healthy way during your downswing. Okay. That's the switch. When that switch flips, it's like game over. You become lethal because not even the worst thing, when the worst thing makes you the most inspired to play, you know that you're aligned with your passion. And that's why I stay in poker, is because I have yet to find another environment that I can insert myself into that gives me the opportunity to turn my darkest nightmare into my biggest passion. Like the ability to develop perspectives that allow you to passionately explore nightmares That to me is something that's extremely special because of the opportunity that it provides you to develop yourself as a person. Ultimately, I don't play poker because I like the game. I play poker because I love the opportunity it provides me to reach a more balanced experiential state. It could be anything, and it probably will be something in the future, like any art form. I think you could talk to anybody who's mastered their art form or approached mastery, and they'll tell you the same thing. I'll do this thing for as long as it gives me the opportunity to grow. And when I exhaust that, maybe it's time to move on to another angle or another art. You keep toggling through dimensions of your art form until there's almost nothing left that interests you. But the cool thing about poker is, like, time and again, we find different dimensions or windows to look at the game through. Like I just gave you a really important one, the 5-year perspective, the million hand perspective. This isn't a conversation that's getting had in the industry. Either because a combination of people aren't willing to face themselves on this direct of a level in terms of what's possible, what they could potentially have to endure emotionally, or because there's just not enough wisdom in the industry in general from people who have been in it for 5 and 10 years and actually sat down to think about what the hell they've been through to create a model that could benefit somebody who's in their mid-20s who wants an easier way or a more streamlined way. It's probably a combination of both, but the point is that we're at a stage in this industry where there are both the data-driven technological tools available for you to play a very intelligent strategy and the mindset technology available from older figures in the industry who've been through it to be able to depart perspectives on someone like you that actually matter, that can actually create positive change in your career. Because going back to what I said before, like, you're saying that you're not someone who needs to learn a hard lesson, and I feel like you deserve to know how to do that. See, I never asked that question when I was younger. My question was, how the hell do I get to the top as fast as possible so I can fix the void in my chest that feels like I have to compensate for insecurity? That was my paradigm when I was 26. Your paradigm seems to be like, I understand that I want to do this for a living. I'm not sure the fastest way to do it, and I want to learn. And I don't sense anything in you that has like this golden boy fucking fantasy of, like, you know, playing perfectly GTO versus OTB Red Baron on Poker Stars so that you can, like, have 1,000-person rail of trolls who you're never going to meet. I don't sense that in you.
Not at all.
You have a lot of potential. Like, I sit with a lot of players. I can feel into the degree to which you're working against yourself, and it's not very large. You get what I mean? Like, I don't sense a lot of self-sabotage in you, which is a very good thing for your potential. So congratulations on whatever you've been working on up until this point, or maybe your parents just loved you enough, but you're in a good place.
I appreciate it. I've actually, it's really funny, my previous role was in sales, so we had a lot of like mindset coaching, like a lot of mindset work behind sales. In a sense, a lot of it relates to poker, being being persistent, never really, how do I word this? Like, just being always really persistent, always working hard, not giving up. When things seem bad, it'll always ride out in the long run. If you don't make a sale for, like, for example, 2 days, it'll eventually work out if you don't change the methodology.
Yes.
It's proven to work over time. So that really kind of relates to poker. But I guess, like, with what you're saying with poker, it's kind of like a game where there's lots of different dimensions. A lot of different ways to look at it. And just what you talked about now was really, really interesting. Really kind of adds more to my perspective of the game as well, with things that I never even thought about, which is really interesting as well.
It's weird how much win rate can be claimed through opening new mindset dimensions.
Yeah.
Like, I never thought that would be possible.
Yeah.
Coming from a bias where I thought, like, as long as I can find the right strategy, I'm good.
Yeah.
That's very one-dimensional.
Yeah.
And it doesn't play out in practice, especially when you start to introduce downswings, and the lack of awareness in the industry over how much people are changing their strategies when things aren't going well is potentially the biggest blind spot of all of poker.
Yeah.
the need to either avoid the career or change the career in some way when things are not going perfectly is the biggest killer of every single person's career.
But I feel like it's almost like it's kind of like a automatic response thing. Like if you keep playing with fire, you keep getting burned. Eventually, you will stop wanting to play with fire. Kind of a bad analogy.
No, but
like
very primitive and very relevant. Like
in a sense, like if you're trying to get what I'm trying to say, like if like they're playing a certain style and they keep getting punished as per se over a small sample size, they may change the way they play only because it's like we're only human.
Which could be good in extreme cases. Like,
yeah.
For someone who's just recklessly punting,
yeah,
maybe the best thing for them is to lower their volatility and not invest so much money. And maybe they can learn that lesson if they're available to the introspective moment that says, well, I've been sending stacks in pretty often and it's not working out.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a different approach.
Yeah.
At the same time, we play an aggressive strategy. Our metrics are probably the most aggressive in the industry, and many times what happens is we have to remind our guys to keep bluffing. You know what I mean? So it's not always that.
Yeah.
What else you got?
Well, that was the main thing I wanted to talk about.
I really feel like this is your main thing, though, and like this is.
And to be honest, I feel like because I have been doing this for a short amount of time, full time for only 6 months, I feel like the way I would handle it now was a lot better than I would handle it 6 months ago. I guess going through that 400-hour window where I was breaking even and went through a really, really tough time mentally. I feel like if I was to go on into another downswing again, I think I would handle it better, especially with extra information now about, potentially even going on a bigger downswing. To think about like in my mind, I thought like a 400-hour, to go on like a 12 blind downswing, for example. In my mind, that was a huge thing. But for me to come here and talk to you, and for you to tell me that 25 blind downswing is normal, that kind of even broadens my
threshold, pain threshold almost.
Because I thought in my mind that the 12 blind downswing was as large as it got.
You need to play with this program.
Yeah. So but then now that I speak to you and you're 25 blind downswings, I'm like, whoa, I didn't think that was possible. And
I hope it excites you to know that that isn't a career killer if you prepare.
It's not a bad thing, though. Don't get me wrong. Not to say it's a bad thing. It's just to say that there's so much more that I don't even know.
Yeah.
Which is exciting to learn.
Dude, you're going to navigate some very dark waters in this career.
Yeah.
And you're going to be stronger because of it. But you don't need to make it darker than it needs to be.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's already enough inevitable shit you're going to go through that you can't control in this career.
Yeah.
Don't make it worse by having bad bankroll management. Maybe that's just the best way to leave this is you don't need to go broke 10 times in your career to extract the value and opportunity that this career offers you.
Gotcha.
You're already going to go through multiple 25 buy and downswings if you play for 5 years.
Yeah.
Those experiences are going to be extremely valuable to you, and the way that you approach them and honestly, the memories that you make from that will sustain you moving forward, and they'll give you the empathy to talk to other people and be like, bro, it's all good.
Yeah.
It's just all good, as long as you put it in perspective.
Yeah.
The moment that you start thinking this has to do with me and I got to change something and this is so unfair, that's the moment where you just start to slide.
Good job.
Any career, I could distill this conversation and give it to somebody who is in sales or an athlete, and it would be the same thing every time. If your performance is on a downward spiral, disidentify with it having to do with you. This doesn't have to do with...
That's really, really cool.
I guess variance is involved in that sense. And yeah, we have the most high variance industry, close to maybe stock market investors and stuff like that. But
So if you ever go on a downward spiral, disassociate it.
With having to do with your sense of worth. Don't fail to critically analyze what's going on, but don't start to tell fucking existential stories about it. the poker gods don't love me anymore.
Yeah.
Like, this is literally what's going on. Whether or not people realize it or not, this is the narrative that's active at the bottom of the psyche.
Yeah, gotcha.
Which is why I think someone like you, I feel like, has less issues with just insecurity in general. Like, I speak to a lot of guys. You're put together well.
Okay,
Energetically, like, you're socially calibrated. You probably have more self-confidence than a lot of players, and that's directly correlated to your ability to navigate a downswing, because you're going to be more resilient to telling yourself a bullshit story in your head that this has something to do with, like, the universe not loving me. Like, literally. I know it sounds crazy, but, like, if we really scrape the basement of the contextual narrative of a player who's in a downswing, time and again we're going to find that it's like, I'm not in a universe that is supportive of me.
Okay.
Like, I am in a hostile universe might be the core narrative of every player who's in a deep run bad. If you can scrape that out and actually look at it and see this is completely assumptive, and it's just a story that I tell myself because it holds me in a success barrier that I'm afraid of busting through, if you can actually get to that level, you're free.
Wow. It's like some deep stuff going on.
Oh, it goes as deep as you want it to, and that's why, like, I've considered whether or not I want to do, like, a very deep existential seminar for poker, and maybe it would only cater to a few people, but I think it would probably be the most valuable discussion that we could have.
Because this is something every single player would
Well, it's something that if you want to actually distill this game down to the root, we're going to end up existential every time. Now, basically, this game is the surface level, and if we keep going under the sea down to the bedrock, what we're going to find is, like, a 3-word sentence like, nobody loves me, or the universe is out to get me. Okay. That's really the belief that once it gets overturned, like, everything opens up. Yeah. And it's a gradient. Like, you don't just overturn that. You go through levels of overturning that belief. But, like, at 32, I can say that I've scraped a lot of sludge off the bottom of the ocean. Yeah. And I've seen how a lot of the shit that I felt like was pressing on me was actually just me misperceiving the reality. So I was just working against myself. And when I tell you that, like, I don't sense that you're working against yourself in a self-sabotaging way to any heavy degree, like, it's going to make your ride a lot easier. Yeah. You're still going to have to do the work, but yeah. Switch it.